6:30. Starting. This is the Development Review Board for Burlington for February 3rd. I'm looking at the minutes here. We have just 3 items on the agenda, 2 of which I think are going to be deferred. So I'll just say when we call the items, we ask the applicant to come up, and we'll swear people in at that point. Here we go. Here's the agenda. So the first item is the agenda, and we have, I think, 2 items where there's a request to, one's been withdrawn and one is deferred. Is that right, Scott?
Grand Street has withdrawn. 260 South Union Street has withdrawn.
Okay.
And the other business items aren't really other business. It's simply a deliberative item the board needs to wrap up.
So is anybody here for Grant Street or South Union? No. Okay, then we will address as they come up. Communications, we have minutes in our packet from January 22nd, which if you will look at, feedback you have. And moving on, under the first item is 20, do we have to take an action on those?
No, it's been withdrawn. They've disappeared.
Withdrawn. Okay, then we will skip Grant Street and skip South Union and go to the first public hearing item, which is 389 Riverside Avenue. And the city will go first for this. Is the property owner here?
Not yet, but it's not quite past 5 past 5.
Okay, maybe if we could wait just a minute and we will look at the other business first.
Okay.
It won't take very long, but we have to take action on 180-266 Queen City Park Road, where there was a appeal filed by South Burlington, and that has been resolved. So
there were 2 appeals. The board decided on the one by the CRZ group. The other appeal by the city of South Burlington was conditionally withdrawn based upon acceptance of a condition that I have copies of here tonight, reflecting the revised plan. So it hasn't been withdrawn insofar as the board has not acted on incorporating that condition into the permit.
And the revised plan is what was shown at the hearing.
That's correct.
2 weeks ago. That was basically the relocation of the drive to keep it basically out of South Burlington.
That's correct. There was a slight adjustment to the southernmost curb cut to keep it within the city of Burlington, and the proposed conditions was read into the record by the applicants. But again, as I said, I have a copy here if you care to see it.
And that wasn't in our motion. We missed that one.
So we have to have.
So the board needs to actually take action on this item, and I think the action would simply be to incorporate this condition into the permit, right? You upheld, in your other action, you upheld issuance of the permits, so you would incorporate this condition reflecting the revised site plan. That's all that is.
Do we have a copy of what that condition is?
Yes.
You're about to hand it out to us. We didn't have it in our nifty little pad here. Huh? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So it's this item A, which is what we want to include in our conditions of approval.
Right. So it amounts to incorporating that condition into the permit.
Okay. I think this is what we discussed at our hearing, so if anybody has anything they want to discuss on this, or can somebody make a motion?
Sure. I'll move that that we adopt condition A of Mr. Dunkeel's January 22nd, 2020 email into our approval on item number 20-0579 AP 18266 Queen City Park Road.
Is there a second on that? Springer seconds. And I mean, just to clarify, this is something that was discussed at our hearing, and we had seen the plan was revised to show this condition. So this is pretty much what we had looked at last time.
And we should have incorporated it this time.
Yes. Right. Yes. So all in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Okay, cool, thank you.
And we didn't open that as, here, we didn't have to open that, or we just took that up?
Nothing needed to be opened. The hearing was closed. It was just a matter of deliberating.
Okay.
Administrative amendment.
So is the property owner here now for Riverside Drive? No.
Scott, have you heard from the property owner
No,
since the submission?
I have not. Have you, Ted?
Bill?
And this is, he's appealing a notice of violation,
Correct.
and there's penalties associated with a notice of violation. Is that true?
There can be.
No,
Maybe
I
not.
mean, it could reinforce him, but while it's on appeal, it's not tolling. Scott, what's our next week look like?
Next hearing, you mean?
Yeah.
Do you know?
There's only two things. It's 49 Fletcher and something else.
Okay.
I have it in the-
Only two things.
So we can move it to that. And
Why should we move?
Yeah, I'm also wondering that too. It says be here at 5.
I mean, Bill Ward, did you want to?
There's a request for a continuance, I would at least.
Not yet.
Okay.
There has not been a
We
response.
do have someone that's here as a witness, so I want to take advantage of his time in the event that we can at least
Yeah,
take
yeah.
some of the evidence and
Well, if we're going to discuss this, I think you probably should open the public hearing and swear in anybody who's going to speak on this Riverside Drive project. So would you raise your right hand? And do you swear to tell the truth and whole truth on the pain and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay. And one of the odd things about it, basically, he did not disagree with the violation in terms of having debris dumped on the property inappropriately, right? Do you want to come up, Dan?
Yeah, Ted, since the city goes first, why don't you just present to us briefly what the issue is and walk us through why the city found a violation here. And if the applicant's not here when you wrap up, we'll decide if we need, what we're going to do then.
Okay. My name is Ted Miles. I am the Code Compliance Officer for the Permitting Inspections Department. This complaint was initially received about Phil in November of 2018. I was not the compliance officer then, Director Ward. It was the one who took the initial pictures then and had conversation with the owner of the property. A warning letter was then sent in December of 2018 to the owner about the fill being placed, and then things got quiet for a period of time. In October of 2019, our office received another email complaint about fill being dumped on properties on Riverside Avenue. Received several pictures, but no addresses with those pictures, so we did go out and take a look and determined that it actually involved 3 different properties, 365, 389, and 411 Riverside Avenue. Warning letters were sent to the owners of 365 and 411 Riverside Avenue, but we did not send an additional warning letter to the owner of 389 because one had already previously been sent. After not hearing a response from the owners in regards to those, a notice of violation was sent to the properties on November 20th of 2019. The The owners of 365 and 411 responded to the letters by applying for the permits as requested. The owner of 389 then filed an appeal of the violation. Within your packet there are 5 photos that were included, 2 of those from November of 2018 that showed the conditions at the time of the initial complaint. And again, those photos were taken by Director Ward. The following photos that were taken, number 3 was taken, 4 and 5 were taken by myself. Number 5 was taken on October 9th. That showed the condition of the 389 property as it was on October 9th, the day after the complaint was received via email, which shows some additional material from the initial complaint from the year before. That shows that some large concrete boulders and some additional dirt fill had been placed on the property.
Hey, Ted, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Absolutely.
I don't think there's really any dispute that there's material and fill have been added. The question I have for you is, do you have any commentary on the statements in our submission that the dumping was done by somebody else? Do you believe it's the owner doing the dumping or somebody else?
The owner did have conversation with myself and did say that the dumping has happened several times over the summer, but he did not give permission for somebody to do it. We would acknowledge that that may be the case, but after the first time it has happened, it would be the owner's responsibility to take some kind of action to stop it from continuing to happening, which did not happen. Nothing took place to prevent this from further happening.
So you don't think he's actually doing the dumping?
Correct.
Not his stuff that's back there?
Correct. I don't know if, I don't have no way to know who is actually doing it, just that it actually was happening at the property, and that.
So was what?
The initial complaint, I would think that if somebody's dumping something on your property, you would take some kind of action to.
Sure.
Was what was happening at his property different than what happened at the other 2 properties that had violations?
This was actually happening at his property.
Right, but the other properties where there were notice of violations for dumping, was that also not by the owners, or were those properties was the owners making?
Those were from the owners.
Okay,
From
so this one was
365 and
different.
411, those were by the owners, yes, and they have acknowledged as such as well. And they have hired a geotechnical engineer to assist them with some work there, and they've also been in contact with the city engineer, Norm Baldwin.
They being the other owners?
The owners and the geotechnical engineer.
But when you say the owners, you're not talking about the owners of 389?
No, 365 and 411 have been in contact with geotechnical engineers and Norm Baldwin with the city.
So I'm looking at your conclusions, and you've given 3 recommendations, and then I'm looking at the submission that was filed by the owner, and specifically paragraph 5. If we go down to the slight bottom, it says, I plan to apply for the required city permits to install a permanent fence along the back of my parking area, to have large pieces of concrete dumped on the embankment of my property taken away next spring, and plant more grass and trees in the spring or summer. I'm also willing to follow any recommendation from the city to improve the safety and prevent soil erosion on my property. Has the applicant raised any objections to your recommendations? It seems like they're agreeing to them.
No.
Okay.
He is not. And our recommendation at the time would be for him not to do anything until he consulted with the geotechnical engineer so that he doesn't create more of a problem. One of the pictures that I've included with your photos there actually shows some cracking happening at the embankment there, so that is a result of the illegal dumping and is creating a stress on the piece there. So our recommendation would be not to do anything with it until they consulted with the geotechnical engineer, as we recommended in our notice of violation.
Your picture 4 out of 5 shows basically a muddy area on the top of the bank with a lot of tire tracks in it. I'm just.
I hope you have the one. I think, is that the one that's showing the cracks at the top?
No, this is 5. This should be.
This would be the second one
I
over
think it's
from
4.
from the left if you scroll 2 over.
Number 4 or 5 shows.
I think my photos might be numbered different than yours.
It shows like, I don't know if it's a dumpster or something over on the right side of the photograph. The house is on the left, and it's just a muddy area.
Dated November
Is that
30,
the-
2018.
Is that the one November 30th, 2018?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a picture from Director Ward.
So I mean, is that the condition of the property up there, that it's basically
That
not,
was in November 2018.
that's not grass or anything? I mean, it's just,
No, in one of your other photos, on October 9th, 2019, 11:35 photo actually shows grass in that location.
Could you clarify the definition that you were using for dumping here? Is this dumping all three properties? Was this dumping for the purposes of trying to remedy an issue, or is this like what I'm thinking of as illegal dumping that is trying to get rid of some type of refuse without going through the proper channels?
I really couldn't tell you what the purpose of was that they were doing it, but it is a mix of materials. There is some garbage material in with it. There's some brick, some metal material in it. There's some concrete. There is some dirt, soil. So it's a combination of things. It's not just household trash kind of thing you're speaking of. But
So, I mean, from the pictures that I see here, and from your opinion, this would not have been an attempt to try to remedy a property issue. It would have been, you know, the dumping of materials.
if in my opinion, it almost looks like they were dumping some kind of material for bank stabilization, which is usually why people dump large concretes and such as that. It's usually for soil stabilization, but if it's not done correctly, it can have an adverse effect, which in this case it did.
Sure.
I guess I do have a question about how far we want to go without the owner being here. We have a violation, we have a recommendation, we have a witness that, is that true? Somebody's here from the public to speak on this?
Yes.
And maybe, just to respect everybody's time,
Yeah.
maybe we can hear from him too, just to hear what he's adding to this conversation. Do you want to come up and introduce yourself? And appreciate your being here, and sure. Should hear what you have to say.
So, bring this up a bit. Paul Bjurman, I'm a professor of geology at University of Vermont, and I have an expertise in landslides and human landscape interaction. And so my involvement with this started actually last April. This property is on my walk home from where our building is on campus, and I walk both the lower trails and the upper trails there. And have also been involved in areas near this since John Racy, the former building inspector, called me probably 15 years ago about Riverside Glass and a landslide that happened there that ended up dumping material into the Winooski River. So I think one day in April, I was walking along the top of the bank and noticed a pile of new fill and some ground cracks, and just took a couple pictures off my phone. And during the rest of the summer, continued to document this as I'd walk home, both from above and below. And if you fast forward till the first week of October, I was walking through there and noticed some really significant ground cracking in that fill. And I would have to go through all of my images, but I believe there was at least one additional filling event during the summer and perhaps two. And as Ted described, the fill was a mixture of soil material, concrete waste, asphalt, metal, and it was definitely being emplaced in the neighboring property. That's where the bulk of the fill was, but there was a significant amount of fill on this property. It looks, and you can see the photos that I brought you, as well as sort of an abbreviated, I wouldn't call it a report, but a set of notes with the photos that I maintained. It appears all to have been graded, so this was not just come in at night, dump a dump truck, but somebody actually had earth-moving equipment to smooth this fill. When there was some of the fill failed early in the summer, they replaced it with more fill. You can see it poured around the trees. So this to me was a very intentional filling of the slope. Because of my long-term interest in this, and I use these sites for teaching at the university and similar sites, I started doing some digging through the Burlington Free Press, through the historical photo archives, and there's a record of filling in this area that goes back into the 1930s. There's also a record of landslides that goes back into the 1930s, and those landslides are in fill. So my reason for being here tonight is that Bill asked me to come and testify about this property, but I also think it's really important for all of you to know that I think there's a pretty high liability along that portion of Riverside Ave that we're going to have continued failures. And I think the choice is going to be, do you do that extensive geotechnical engineering and intervention, or do you find a way to prevent the hazard from being there? And I say that particularly about this subject property because if you look at the photos, you'll see that about half this foundation is now exposed fully on the back there. And my professional judgment will be that it's a really hazardous place to be. I think the filling was going on there to expand parking. If you look at the Google Streets images, and there's streets images that go back to 2009, you'll see that vegetation's been removed and the parking area has been expanded. Not at the subject property, but the one just downslope of that. The subject property actually has a number of parking spaces, some of which have now been compromised by the landslides. The other thing that I noticed in looking at my photos is there actually was a person that 2 days after the slide happened on Halloween, And I got back in the next morning two mornings later along the river once the water had gone down, and I have a photograph of somebody actually moving rocks at the top of the slope behind that property. Presumably
Do you
to
have
try
that
to.
photo?
I do. I have that all for you here.
Can we see it?
I've also sent Bill an electronic version of this, and I downloaded the Google Streets images for you, so you could look at them. Unfortunately, our color printer wasn't working well today. But I have a series of images that you want me to describe them, and then I can hand them to you.
I would prefer to have a copy while you describe it, but
I don't have a copy, so I can't easily describe them at the same time. These are the streets images on here. And then starting in April, I have photographs that show the subject property and show the fill being embanked right next to the property. So I find it hard to believe that the person who owned it didn't know that that fill was being pushed up against the property. It's pretty clear it's going up against the foundation.
I have the Google Earth photos here of the streetscape. And it is, I mean, it looks so different than the current photos because it looks neat and tidy. The parking area is nice and clean, the little fence there, and all that's gone at this point. So,
most of that has gone down the hill.
wasn't there a house that got abandoned along there at some point in the last couple of years because of the bank stabilization?
No, that was on the other side of the street.
On the other side of the street?
Yes. I'm familiar with that property as well.
The only one I know that was abandoned was the Riverside Glass. And that was because the rear end of that property was hanging in midair after the landslide. Although if you walk now and you look at the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, there's a sinkhole that's forming in there. So I think it's only a matter of time before that too will fail. Also behind the new restaurant there that Omar owns, the Somali restaurant, you can see some of the landsliding pushing toward Riverside Ave. I think what's probably most compelling in this case is if you look at the free press, and I did not bring those with me, but I can forward that on to Bill and onto the board here. There's a free press article, it's either 68 or 80, and I'm sorry I don't have my notes with me, that shows a landslide in exactly the same place as this one that happened at Halloween that extended to the sidewalk of Riverside Ave. So we know that happened in the past. Everything from Riverside Ave out to the edge of those parking areas is fill right now. If it happened once, the chances are it's going to happen again. So my caution as a professional geologist is this is a dangerous place to have buildings and people.
Thank you. Any questions further? No. I have a question. I don't know if where's the, I don't know what direction this thing is going right now, the property line towards the river. How far down does this bank does the property line go?
Fairly close to the river's edge.
So, and that's the case all along Riverside Drive, that the property lines go down to the river.
Yes.
And basically, the responsibility of that bank is divided up to each one of those property owners.
Yes. The property at 365, where his parking lot is, he only goes approximately 30 feet beyond the parking area. The area beyond him from there belongs to the property at 389 Riverside Avenue.
389.
Yes, yes. It goes into an L shape behind that property, and he goes almost all the way down to the river.
And there's a parking area just past 389 with the concrete, the granite bollards out that. Is this a city turnout there? Is that a city property?
No. No, that's all private property along the stretch of road there. Where the parking lot you see in the section with the granite bollard, that actually belongs to 365.
So I guess just philosophically, I mean, does it work to have the individual property owners responsible for such a fragile piece of, geology or whatever it is? I mean, I know that's how it is.
It is a shared interest, which is why the city is also involved. DPW is also involved in working with the folks to find a solution with it and stuff, which is why Norm is involved in it, because it effectively, in essence, it will affect the city as well as the property owners. I do know in speaking with Norm Baldwin that they have consulted with engineers who also are going to be doing studies along Riverside Avenue as well.
I think it gets even a little deeper than that because it's a state highway. So there's been a lot of state money. Again, if you look through the free press history, there's been a lot of state money put into stabilization there in the past. Unfortunately, they seem to have lost all the drilling logs and reports that go with that. We haven't been able to find them, nor has the state.
They're just dealing with the right-of-way, basically, right? They're not going to deal with...
Well, they have, though. The state has given money before to deal with stabilizing the slope. I don't know if you all are familiar, but in late 1950s, there was a major slide It was just toward the river from the former landslide that now is the Riverwatch condos. And that slide was big enough to take out Riverside Ave not once but 3 different times. And finally ended up with a hole that went almost down to river level, extended back into where the Riverwatch condos are right now that had to be filled, and Riverside Ave was looped around there for several months while that happened. So there's a history of instability here and state involvement as well as city.
History of instability sounds appropriate.
So philosophically, what you asked, I think it's a decision the city is going to have to make, and probably pretty soon, of is it worth the investment of public and private funds to stabilize an area that's probably inherently unstable? Or is it a better use of city funds to think about moving out some of those properties and turning this back into forest or park?
Beyond
From the philosophical piece.
That's beyond our notice of violation.
Trust me, we're not going to answer that question.
But, so we do have a notice of violation here, but also the recommendations do connect to Public Works and asking them to be involved in the solution. Is that right, Ted? That's basically what's in your recommendations?
No. My recommendation is that the owner's contract with a geotechnical engineer who works with the city of Burlington.
To work with the city. Right. That's what, I mean, but get them connected into it.
Yes. And I don't know if this property owner has connected with the other two in that, but I did give him the information for the engineer that they have consulted these people, this engineer, and that it would be in their best of interest to do it together, also share the cost of that.
So, I mean, I don't know where.
Well, look, it's 5:30.
Yeah.
And the notice of violation says you must attend the hearing.
Right. So I'm comfortable finding, that, sort of finding against the appeal of the violation. The only thing I'm wondering about is whether we have any ability to ask Public Works to be a little bit more proactive with this owner who seems not to be present right now.
Is that I don't think that's part of the question.
That's not
Part of the question, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Public Works can do what they want.
well, we
right.
can,
And just for purposes of filling out the record, so how did the applicant receive notice?
Of the hearing? It's mailed to him.
Okay, and you didn't get a return stamp or anything like that?
I also send out an email, like,
Uh,
I send out to you guys.
There's no returned envelope in here.
You didn't get a
And
bounce
that's
back
where it
on-
would go if it was returned.
And you didn't get a bounce back on the email you sent?
No.
Any reason to think that he's out of the country?
I have no idea where he is.
And you could push this back until the next meeting in February and give another try before finalizing it, or act tonight.
Well, I move that we close the public hearing.
I agree with it.
Let's do that
Let's
first.
close the public hearing. I think that makes sense. Yes. Okay. And then, how do people feel about voting? Still in our hearing, but we could.
I have no problem voting on it. It's pretty clear you got to be here, and we took all regular notice steps, and the applicant's not here.
No reason to think you didn't get the notice?
And if there's a problem, you can appeal it and deal with it, unfortunately.
So he filed his appeal on December 6th, it looks like. That's stamped into planning and zoning. And so we have that correspondence from him that he was taking action. He knows this is going to, that there's a result for his filing the appeal is going to come before us. And he said he had been out of the country beforehand, but did not say that he was going to be out of the country in the future, so.
Well, it also doesn't look like he disputes any of the recommendations. It says in his response that I'm also willing to follow any recommendation from the city and to improve the safety and prevent soil erosion on my property.
Right, so
Yeah, he wasn't contesting what happened, so.
public hearing closed.
Public hearing's closed. We actually have no other business here. I'm going to actually close the hearing. We're done. We're
Adjourned.
We're adjourned, thank you. I knew there was a word out there.